everyone. My name is Barsha Karki, and I welcome you to All About Data. This is where I chat with industry experts around all things data, from how they use it to how it impacts their lives. It is a really fun and exciting conversation today with my guest, Dan Frith, Head of Technology at Digital Sense. Dan wears a few different hats, and perhaps I can get Dan to speak himself about the different things that he's been up to. Welcome, Dan. Would you like to speak a little bit about your role and what else you've been up to?
Sure. Thanks, Barsha. So I'm head of technology at Digital Sense. We're a cloud provider up in Brisbane, Queensland. We focus primarily on, cloud data protection as a service, storage as a service, all kinds of infrastructure type things as a service is what we really do. So my role basically takes responsibility for all of the platform that powers those various services from an infrastructure and technology perspective. So I have a leg in a bunch of different camps. I sort of get involved in the design, the build and the run, the maintain, the life cycle, all sorts of parts of the services. I do a bit of product management as well. So I kind of shape, some of the product standards we use, the architecture, all that kind of thing. So I'm across quite a bit of the Digital Sense business now, from a technology and commercials perspective. In my spare time, I also run a blog at penguinpunk.net.
Yes, this
I've
is
been
what I
doing
was
that
looking for.
for about 13 years now. So it originally started, as a way for me to keep notes when I was doing a lot of engineering work in the field, and it sort of grew into something else. So on the back of that, I've been to quite a few industry events overseas now. I get the opportunity to speak to the likes of yourself from time to time on these kind of things, and it's something I'm really passionate about. Is spreading the word around storage and data and data protection and those kind of things, because I think sometimes it's a little bit taken for granted in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pretty bold claim you make as well, right? And, it's so colorful, penguinpunk.net as well. It kind of brings a little bit of color to what might be a bit boring in the technology world. So it's pretty interesting. The first time I looked it up, and I invite people listening to this to maybe have a quick look and go through and see if there is something that's of interest to them, right? So that's quite interesting. What kind of trends have you seen in the data management approach, within Digital Sense or customers that you talk to, perhaps, there's been so many technologies and businesses tend to look for the right solution, and sometimes the concept of whether it's the technology driving the business or the business driving technology, and what do you see in your conversations, and what would, how would you advise the customer to pick the right solution?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've really seen probably over the last decade has just been an explosion in the growth of both structured and unstructured data.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's led to, beyond the physics problem of storing all that data somewhere, is the fact that organizations are really struggling with things like compliance, mm-hmm. and how they wrap, governance around some of that data, what they do with the data.
Yeah. It's
a pretty easy conversation to have when you have 10 terabytes of legal forms stored somewhere safely for safekeeping for 7 years. But, mm-hmm. As time goes on and you develop, more of that IP or more of that data, it becomes harder for people, I think, to understand at what point they can actually throw data away, at what point the life of the data, ends.
Yeah,
and at what point they have to keep it.
And doesn't it get a bit more interesting when you're not talking just about where, like your physical data center that the data is staying at? You're then talking about the different hyperscalers that's available to you, even creating your own private cloud, for example, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, we've certainly seen, an explosion of data at the edge, via various IoT telemetry devices, in the core, obviously, where it's traditionally been, a problem and a thing to deal with, and then in the cloud. And I think we're finally catching up in terms of the idea that multi-cloud is a possibility, but I don't know that we've necessarily caught up with the idea that it may not always be the best thing to be doing. That someone's idea of multi-cloud is the reality of that is often very different, I think, to what they'd anticipated or what they'd seen on a PowerPoint slide somewhere. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so many different options, but I guess, where we should be looking at is, does everything that we see make sense for our business, or what is it that actually makes sense to my business now?
Exactly, and I think it's ironic that a head of technology will be talking about generic or functional requirements for a business and what the business is actually trying to achieve. I should be talking to you about how I can run Kubernetes over here, or how I can do this thing with big data over there, or what my AI ML play is. But what's really valuable to business, I think, is how they can best use that technology to meet the business, to do the business of the business. So whether that's making money or whether that's offering services to people, that's ultimately what's really driving all this. It's cool to talk about, all flash arrays here, or how we move this from there to there, this cloud to that cloud. But realistically, we're doing all this because we need to, we need to actually solve some business problems. And I think oftentimes, I guess certainly in the IT industry, we get caught up in the tech of everything. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the business, which is really what's driving, that technology, or should be driving that technology. And if you're trying to shoehorn a business practice into a bit of technology because that's what you have at hand, that can sometimes be a bit of a tricky thing to undertake.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an interesting point of view, and a bit, critical of the conversations that might be being had, in business conversations, right? And especially even in your role where you are the advisor to a customer, and they probably heard of this new thing and they want to deploy it somehow in their business, and whether that makes sense to them or not. And this is where you'd come in and go, okay, great, we've got all of these technologies at hand, but perhaps let's look at standardizing everything right now, and then look at building and growing, and then making use of of everything else that's available.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very much about understanding, I think, what you're trying to achieve. And frequently customers come, to us, and I guess I've dealt with customers in a past life and being a customer, and it's very easy to glom onto some kind of solution, go, well, I think that's going to fix my problem.
Yeah.
Without necessarily understanding the entirety of the problem, or having a really good, 10,000 foot view or something. There's no shame, I think, in having a high level view of stuff. I think that's the best place to start. Yeah. Often with these conversations, because if you jump straight to a whiteboard, or you say, I just want to do widget X and that's gonna solve my problem, I feel like there's definitely opportunities that are missed frequently as a result of those conversations.
Being a long-time NetApp customer, what are your thoughts around NetApp's transformation? Yeah,
so I think one thing that's impressed me the most about NetApp has been that it's no longer a conversation about waffle and ONTAP and the amount of disks and the network file system and all that sort of stuff. It's really become a more complete picture of what you need to do, I guess, to deliver infrastructure and applications at scale effectively, both on premises and in the cloud, or even at the edge, wherever you sort of need the data to do work for you. That's NetApp's got a story around that. Yeah. And I think the way that NetApp's been able to bring that all together has been quite compelling as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm fairly new to NetApp, but that idea of data fabric, creating that fabric, no matter where you are, you have that data, and no matter where you need it, how long for, at what time, creating that fabric, I think is absolutely a very compelling story, right?
Yeah. It's about, I think it demonstrates, I guess, a good understanding that it isn't just about, the speeds and feeds or the infrastructure that powers that, but it's more about the applications, the higher order stuff that sits on top of that infrastructure that really helps businesses do their business. I think that's...
Yeah. I appreciate your time and insight and this fun conversation, Dan.
No, thanks for your time. It's been great.
Thank you. Speak soon again.